The Cubs drop another game to the Brewers, which means another series loss against an NL Central opponent. The Cubs are now in last place as we begin July. What's next for this team? With the trade deadline looming at the end of the month, are the team bound to be sellers? We're going to talk about that and more on the Cubs baseball channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section and let us know how you're feeling about this team as we recap the state of the Cubs. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs baseball channel. My name is Anthony Pasquale on Twitter at @Ant_Pasquale3. Also, make sure you guys follow our brand new Cubs baseball channel Twitter account on Twitter there at Cubs_channel. You could also find it by just searching Cubs baseball channel on Twitter. We're planning on getting on TikTok and Instagram soon. So get in that comment section. Let us know if you guys would like to see us there as well. But we are on Twitter. Make sure to give us a follow there, and we'll bring that account to some of the other social media soon. But thank you guys for joining us on the Cubs baseball channel. As we start July, we're going to do a little state of the Cubs as they begin an ever important month after one of another bad months. The Cubs went, I believe, 11-17 in the month of June. One game better than their 10-18 record that they posted in May. So that's two straight months that you've played a combined 15 games below 500 of baseball. That's just not going to cut it. You've heard Craig Counsell and Jed Hoyer day after day talk about how, 2 runs isn't going to cut it. Blowing a lead isn't going to cut it. This and that isn't good enough. And at some point, the tides have to turn. Well, they haven't. It's been 2 months and the tides haven't turned. It's getting to the point where you can't really call this a skid or a dry spell or a slump. This is what the team is. And shame on Jed Hoyer and Craig Counsell for letting it get this far. But the Cubs lose again yesterday to the Brewers by the score of 7-1. A much needed day off today before a lengthy homestand against the Phillies and the Angels. We're going to get into all of that in a little bit. But just to recap yesterday's game a little bit, the Cubs hit a leadoff homer from Nico Horner. Cody Bellinger also singled in the first. Cubs got off to as good a start as you could imagine. And I think a lot of us were thinking about Justin Steele's message to the team on Saturday when he told the team to wake the F up. And it seemed like they responded well to that. They got the win on Saturday, started with a leadoff homer Sunday. And I got to be honest, the optimist in me said, man, maybe this is the moment we look back to and say this is where the tide turned. Well, not so fast. The Cubs did not get a hit the rest of the ball game after the first inning, and they end up losing 7-1. Kyle Hendricks takes the loss. But this series against the Brewers, and we all coined it as some sort of important, pivotal, turning point type of series should the Cubs take 2 out of 3 or sweep the Brewers, ended up looking like a microcosm of the whole season. Bad bullpen, bad offense. Honestly, I take that back. The bullpen was pretty good this series, but offense was bad. Couldn't get any big hits when you needed them. When you got the lead, you gave it right back. It was just the same old, same old. And I think 4 plays really break it down into these struggles this year. Ian Happ misses that fly ball yesterday. He's supposed to be your Gold Glover. I don't care if it was the sun or a bad route or whatever, but it goes down as a hit, so all those runs end up being earned, but the Cubs don't give up 6 in that inning if Ian Happ catches that fly ball. So that's a play obviously you'd like to have back. Then you go back to Saturday, you couldn't execute the rundown, then a bloop and a bunt later, and Justin Steele gives up 3 runs. He's pissed off. That play was kind of like the big one that sticks out for me. On Friday, Cody Bellinger forgot how many outs there were, ran into a very easy double play. Miguel Amaya had, I think, his 5th catcher's interference of the year, has to lead the league. He's been terrible behind the plate. And it's just, like 4 different guys there. It's a microcosm of just how bad this team has been at the easy stuff, playing defense and running the bases, that and not having your glove hit the hitter's bat. Those are supposed to be things that you don't even need to think about during a game. You got to worry about acquiring 27 outs and putting runs up on the board. missing routine plays and running into outs on the bases makes it that much harder to win. And this team needs wins in the worst way. So doing this consistently hurts this team. But as we get into July, obviously at the end of this month is a very important day of the trade deadline. It's where the good teams try to get better and the bad teams essentially try to get worse and punt the rest of the season away by giving away some of their best players in an effort to restock and build toward the future. The Cubs find themselves in a very similar spot to where they were last season. And last year, right about this time, the Cubs turned it up a notch, went on a strong run in July, including winning 10 out of 12 games. And then all of a sudden they were buyers at the deadline, played themselves into playoff position. We know how that ended, but a lot of people are realizing that this is almost a mirror image of what last season looked like. And as they enter July, can this Cubs team turn it up a notch and go on that run? Well, we've been talking about it for like 2 months, and it hasn't seemed like they've been able to do so. It has to happen quick. And if it doesn't, this team is going to be sellers at the deadline. But we've talked about it. They don't have much to sell. And the one thing the Sox have a leg up on the Cubs this year, the Sox have more to sell. Garrett Crochet has pitched himself in the Cy Young conversation in the American League, and Luis Robert is better than any player on the Cubs roster right now. And those are two guys that the White Sox are going to shop, and they're going to try to get as much back for as they can. They've got Michael Kopech, a hard-throwing righty, at the back end of their bullpen as well. There's not too many other options to sell. The Cubs probably have more quantity, but the White Sox definitely have more quality to sell. And they're obviously a much worse record, so they're for sure going to sell and probably going to set this market that the Cubs could potentially take advantage of. Cody Bellinger is a guy who can opt out at the end of the season, which essentially means he's a rental piece in a trade. So he's a guy. Mike Tauchman, if he gets healthy, is a guy that the Cubs could try to trade. Patrick Wisdom has some value. There's some power in that bat. A contending team might try to take a bite on him. I don't know if the Cubs would choose to, but both Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele would be excellent candidates to yield a large return back. I'm sure the Cubs would like to move on from the money that they owe Seiya Suzuki or Dansby Swanson or Ian Happ. Should it get worse over the next couple of weeks? Not sure if you're able to move Swanson's money or if Suzuki or Happ would waive their no trade clause. And then there's a bunch of pitchers that you could, talk about potentially moving. Jameson Taillon, Kyle Hendricks, Javier Assad, if he gets healthy. Then some of those bullpen pieces, if they get healthy as well, maybe a Mark Leiter Jr. or a Julian Merriweather, Drew Smiley. There's a bunch of names. The Cubs, essentially, if they get into seller's mode, there's not one player on this team that, at least offensively, that you would say he's untouchable because nobody's been good enough. Christopher Morel is a guy that they could trade. Morel that they kind of carved open that third base role in hopes that his bat would be justifiable to keep him in the lineup. And instead, the bat's been worse than before, and the defense hasn't improved enough at third base to justify hurting yourself defensively when you're not helping up enough offensively. Give credit where credit's due. Ian Happ has carried this team a little bit here and there, but aside from that, it's been bleak offensively. Bellinger, Swanson, Horner, Morel, Suzuki, all have been regressing. I think Michael Busch's spot on this team is probably safe. I think Pete Crow-Armstrong is probably safe. I would lean toward the Cubs wanting to preserve the contracts of Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele as they're controllable, very talented left-handed pitchers. The rest of that roster, I think you could slap a for sale sign on soon. But the Cubs obviously have a chance to control their own destiny and start winning ball games. The only issue is every time we think they might be getting close to a run, it doesn't happen. The Cubs have not won 3 consecutive games or more since April 23rd to April 26th. It's unacceptable. The fans deserve better. But if you don't get better in the next month, you have to take a step back to take a step forward. I think if you don't improve in this next month and it's 3 months of bad baseball, you have to realize that this team isn't going to be the team to get it done in the postseason. And if you realize that as an organization, I don't care if it means, not making the playoffs this year, if it sets you up in a better spot in years in the future. If you look at this organization in a month after 3 months of bad baseball and honestly say, we can't win the World Series with this roster, then do something about it. trade guys, bring up some guys and see what you have. See what Owen Casey, Moises Ballesteros, Alexander Canario, see what those guys can do. And hopefully you think you're in a better spot next year and the year after that. However, the optimist in me still believes that this Cubs team can make that run. It just has to start soon. But the unfortunate thing that I've come to realize over the last few weeks is the Cubs went into this season hoping to be good. They weren't planning to be good. And that's the part that is so hard to swallow as a Cubs fan. You look at this team that struggled for the first half of last year and turned it up a notch for the second half of last year. Jed Hoyer banked on that second half of last year's team being what you got for all of this year and thought hiring a manager as the big move of the offseason would be enough to swing some of those close games that the Cubs gave away and turn them into a 90-win playoff team. But what Hoyer didn't realize is what maybe the Cubs weren't, their identity wasn't that second half of last year's team. Maybe they're closer to that first half, which is what you've seen for the first half of this year. And shame on Hoyer for not doing more to address that, getting a star into that lineup, getting more depth into that bullpen, and putting a lot on Craig Counsell's shoulders. But he's a good manager. He's not a miracle worker. You can't turn that into good baseball. And to me, I think Jed Hoyer takes that responsibility. It has to be on Jed Hoyer's shoulders when this season eventually, if it eventually turns into a selling season. Jed Hoyer has to own that. You know, you didn't do enough in the offseason. You didn't make the right moves. You gave a lot of money to guys who aren't performing. And as a result, you're going to have to gut this team. You kind of put Craig Counsell in as a blanket to cover up some of the flaws on the roster. And instead, more flaws expose themselves. And Craig Counsell won't be a scapegoat. Instead, Jed Hoyer is going to be exposed. And I think that's kind of what's coming to fruition unless the Cubs turn it up for the month of July. We've talked about it a lot. And that's the frustrating thing is this team was relying on what it got in the second half of last year for a full 162 this year and hoped that hiring a better manager would mean more wins. Instead, you got regression 1 through 9, and Hoyer did not do enough to bolster that roster or the bullpen. And as a result, you're in last place staring up at the rest of the teams in your division and in the wild card race as July starts. So let's do a quick standings check. The Chicago Cubs are in last place, 11.5 games behind the Brewers now after dropping 2.5 to them. Want to really quickly also take a look at the wild card standings like we've been doing the last couple of days. Let me pull those up very quickly here. But yeah, the Cubs are staring up at a bunch of teams now in the entire league. You take a look at these National League standings as I pull them up to the screen. In the wild card, Braves, Padres, Cardinals still setting the pace up there. And they're the Cubs 5 games back, chasing the Reds, the Nationals, the Pirates, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, the Mets, just to get into that third spot. You got to leap 7 teams to get into playoff position. It's not impossible, but the odds are certainly stacked against these Cubs. As it stands right now, the Cubs have an 8.9% chance to make the playoffs here on July 1st and just a 2% chance to win the division. Unacceptable. Cubs take on the Phillies starting Tuesday. It's going to be a 3-game set. If there's any time to catch the Phillies, who are one of, if not the best team in baseball, now's the time. Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, both on the injured list. JT Realmuto's banged up, and the Cubs are going to miss Aaron Nola and Ranger Suarez in this series. So if there's any time to catch them, it's right now. The Cubs need to start going on that run soon that we talk about. Hayden Wesneski gets the start on Tuesday, Shota Imanaga Wednesday, and Jamison Tyone on Thursday. We'll be back throughout the week to kind of recap and preview those games. But for now, jump in that comment section, guys. Let us know how you're feeling about this team. I assume you're probably in line with Mick and I in thinking that this team is tracking towards selling at the trade deadline, but a lot can happen in the month of July. So we'll see. Happy 4th of July week. Hope you guys enjoy the week as July starts, and hopefully the Cubs start playing some better ball to turn things around. But like and subscribe. Follow us now on Twitter and let us know if you'd be excited to see us on TikTok and on Instagram. But for now, thank you guys for listening to the Cubs Baseball channel. I'm Anthony Pasquale. Go Cubs.